mechanical here. So, my goal that I set for this week, maybe even next week, is essentially to work a full fortnight without issues or anything going wrong or anything in general being a problem. I want to work a solid 10 days with nothing stopping me from working, but there would have been problems anyway. So I could only achieve half of that goal, especially at this point in time. So there's good news, there's bad news. Good news is I have thus far achieved half of that goal, which is unachievable anyway to the full extent. So 5 days being the maximum I could achieve anyway is hooray. I managed to do 5 days of courier work for the whole week and not have issues and work from whatever to whatever. I think Monday though I knocked off a little bit early, but I still was on for most of the day. I give myself credit for that. Then I had days where I had to work over hours, and that was like 2-3 days I've had to work overtime. So I've worked from like 8 till 6 or 8 till 7, something like that. And it's been like crazy those days that I've been working. Now, I put the Triton and the Tata on Facebook for sale for a little bit to see what would happen. And from what I can tell, I did get an offer for at least one of the cars. The other one, well, let's just say I'm not going to say how much I want for them because I sort of put it up there hoping to get like an idea of what people would offer. And so what I found was someone offered me $1,000 for the Triton. And I said it's running, it's in good condition, it'll get you where you need it to go. It's had this, and this done to it. Drives well. It's got coolant in it that's proper for this car. I said all these details about it, showed pictures of it with the racks, and all I got offered was $1,000 for it. The Tata, on the other hand, someone said they wanted a bash around car for towing a trailer around, and I thought about it. I'm not going to tell people how much I want for them because they're pretty priceless to me, I think, at this point, because I know it's time I confess about some issues that I think I need to confess about to you guys. The Triton needs about 12 grand spent on it to be 100%. That is $2,400 on the motor, unless I went to someone else to do it. About $2,500 on the suspension, because the rear leafs aren't cheap. They're about $500 each, and then you have all the shockers and the rubbers and the U-bolts and all that stuff you're meant to replace when you do the leaf springs, from what I understand. Then there's the front end, which has all the heavy-duty stuff that needs to be replaced. I think I'll dedicate a video specifically to it sometime. And now I'm having a bit of an issue where I'm driving my car, and it's not maintaining very good traction on the road, so that's a bit of a concern that I'm going to have to figure out. But there is a lot of money that needs to be spent on the Black Beast in order to be good on the road. But I know some things I will do minorly on the car to make sure it's all good to go. The racks on the car are starting to rust. I think I'm going to take them to metal cleaners and get them cleaned up. Then send them maybe to the galvanizers to get them galvanized like the front bar is. And then I'll have them put on the car, essentially after doing that. I have no idea how much it's going to cost. But if I do that, at least I know they're going to last a pretty good long time before I have to, remake them. Because they were pretty cheap to manufacture, but that's only material-wise. Time-wise, they were expensive to make because it took about 2 days of time. And the reason it took 2 days is because you have to go find the materials, you have to plan for new materials, you have to know what you're getting. Whereas if you have stock on hand or know exactly what you're getting, then you're all good. With the Tata, there's only about a maximum about $2,400 have to be spent on it to get it running. Then after that, it needs all the thorough inspections and all the little bits and pieces fixed up on it. So depending on if the brakes are good or not, that's going to be a problem. So we're going to check out the brake pads, the drums at the rear. We're going to check all that, make sure it's within good specs. And if it is all good, then there shouldn't be no need to spend any more money than service and the head on this vehicle, along with all the major service components that have to be done. So I'm going to be having some dinner, and I got my Just to Fish It shirt on. I have no idea what I want to say. It's literally through my mind what I want to say. I think I'm going to keep both the cars, because the reason I'm keeping them, the Tartar is a interesting project car for now to sort of fix up and get running, and also trying to set up some pathways on how to fix a car that can't get parts for. That'll be a really good project. The Triton, on the other hand, is a car that I promise to keep and not get rid of. I've already spent about 10 grand on it, so if I spend another 10, 12 grand on it, I already have spent the money needed to buy a brand new car on this car. So that's a bit of a story right there in and of itself. I'm not very good at talking, am I? I'm just wondering, can anyone even type messages? It says top chat messages, live chat messages. Does this work now? All messages are visible. Whereas top chat says some messages, such as potential spam, may not be visible. Okay. That's what it always sets it to when I do a stream. So this is really nice for dinner. I was actually thinking about what we were going to have, and it's like, to Mum, she was thinking, we'll have half spaghetti, and then you can have chicken schnitzels. But I wanted this sauce with my chicken schnitzels, because we normally go buy that and put it on our sort of hamburgers with the chicken schnitzels. And when we do that, it actually tastes really nice with a salad on it, because this stuff goes well with salad, like the mayonnaise does. So me and my dad decide we're going to go to the shops, we're going to get some food, mayonnaise, and then we have our dinner sorted for tomorrow, but we can also eat something tonight without having to, get something we don't really want. And also then we have some spare food, rather than having to cook more food than Mum wants to cook. It also means less power is used to make food. So yeah, what are you guys having for dinner? That's a really good question, because this is what I'm having. And I think I'm following the trend that Mum gave. She said, oh, you're going to go get that and then you're going to rub it in my face. Who needs to rub anything in anyone's face? Honestly, this looks like rubbing in people's faces, but I'm not. I'm rubbing in the camera's face. There is a head gasket for the Tartar. I believe it was BX920. It's on Super Cheap Auto's website for about $150. And when I was thinking about that head gasket versus this one, I was like, nah, we're not gonna spend that much on a head gasket. I thought, if I'm gonna spend that much on a head gasket, it better be more valuable than this thing, in the sense that this thing doesn't really have the guts, and it doesn't really need a high quality head gasket to keep going. But that's only because it's got low tier parts, sort of thing, that they say they are. They say they're low quality. But surprisingly, I've heard lots of people interested in this car just because of all the things they've read about it. They go and do some research, and it's like a safari vehicle that never breaks down. Wow. And that's why they want them, because they're pretty reliable vehicles. but also they're rare. That's what makes an owner of these things kind of shoot themselves in the foot when they buy one. When they buy tartar, one of these, they're quite rare. Because they're quite rare, there's no industry here to support them part-wise, in which case you have a hard time getting parts. Whereas the Mitsubishi Tritons, like this one here that we're eating off of, are sort of mainstream to most countries, including Australia, that there is heaps of parts available for them, including engine rebuild kits. There isn't much accessory-wise for roof racks on these though. They literally have to be custom manufactured, or fabricated is a better term. They have to be custom fabricated for your vehicle. And they also have to be engineered, because if you don't engineer them, the front isn't meant to have a rack on it. It'll probably, having weight at the front might twist the chassis or do some damage. This one's not 100% engineered. It hasn't been rated by an engineer. But the reason we did what we did is because we could see where the chassis was tenuating, and if it tenuates, we know how to stop it from tenuating. And that was to put a bar in between them with strong bolts that could hold the weight, and a bar that it doesn't matter, it needs to have a little bit of twist in it that it can take, because it's not going to break too easy. So we put this bar in, and I've had no dramas. No dramas with 300 to 500 kilos on the roof. Preferably, we've had 300 on the roof, but that rack could take 500, the middle one could take 500, and the rear one can take 300, because it's not got the structure as these two have. This one couldn't even take 80 kilos without tenuating the chassis, till we put this bar in the middle in order to alleviate some stress that was causing it to attenuate. So is no one going to tell me what they're eating for dinner? I don't need to tell you what I'm having for dinner. But I can tell you what I'm eating off of, and that's the Triton. That's cool. So what did you have for dinner? Oh, wow. I'm just thinking, where is it 4 a.m. in the world right now? I don't know if that's America. Sweet. Thanks to you, I just remembered, there's a Carl's Jr. in my area, and Dad was talking about it. They cook grilled stuff on the thing, and because of I've seen it before, I was thinking, you know, maybe me and Mum should go down there one time, because it's like $4 for a little burger with a grilled piece of chicken on it. And I was like, wow, that's cheap for a burger. Wow. I don't know if they do calamari though. That'd be pretty interesting to see if they did calamari. So, we have been working on another diesel engine, and that's Dad's one, the one in the shed. For the white Pajero, which is behind me, you can't really see it. But we've hit a bit of a brick wall. We need to get bearings for it, because the crank to the rods, I think that's what you call them, crank to rods, essentially those bearings are out of spec. They've been worn out. So they're close to limit, but they're not over limit. They're within tolerance. But Dad wants to bring them back to spec, so then they line up to the crank. There's one bearing on the crank that's the thrust bearing, and that one's pretty bad. Then there are some that are damaged, and they have like a groove in where the oil feeds. And the reason I was telling my dad to replace them is because it says it in the manufacturer's manual where you recon a motor, but also because if you have those score marks, you have that thing where there's not a balanced amount of oil pressure, and if you have a big opening on the side of one of your bearings, all the oil pressure that's meant to go everywhere else is probably just going to go straight out that hole, and then all your other bearings are going to take the brunt for the fact that another bearing failed. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems logical to me, unless there's like regulated pressure, so it's like 5 psi to you now, and then 5 psi to you, and then 5 and 5, and so it's not like a constant tap. Whereas if you turn on the taps, like you know how you're in a house and when you're in the shower, someone turns on the hose, the water pressure goes down. It's like you see all this water, you feel all this water pressure on you, and then all of a sudden it just dies down, and the temperature changes and the water pressure changes. It's like that. And that's what I'd be concerned about with the bearings. Because if you have that same effect with the oil pressure, all the oil pressure is going to go through the hose first. And then you lose oil pressure to valuable components, such as your other bearings. And that's why we're going to do what we've got to do. Okay. This one, the Triton, is a courier truck that I use to drive around in. The Tata was one that was going to go, but it was priorly a work vehicle, but not for me, but for someone else. However, it did haul this motor to the workshop to get it machined a little bit before it went back together. However, the motor in here still needs a proper rebuild because while we tried to fix the problem, we still weren't able to fix it because the problem we have is the compressions were wrong. We had the wrong coolant as well in the system. That the wrong coolant caused the coolant to boil, where it's really critical of the coolant that goes in the system. You have to put the right stuff in because of the temperatures there get above 100 degrees, that it boils. And then when the water boils, it turns to steam. The steam pushes all the water out. There is no more cooling effect in that region. The head gasket gets so hot, it lets go a little bit. And then you have combustion gases going into your cooling system and pushing out all the water. Since I put in the good stuff, retorque the head bolts, I haven't got a problem. The only reason I can retorque the head bolts on this ute or truck, as they call it in some countries, is the reason I can do it is because it's steel where it's leaking. So it's literally not a composite material. It's literally just a stainless steel sheet where the leak occurs. So it's safe enough that you can retorque the head bolts in order to reapply pressure in those points. But you have to release them and retighten them to the right specification. That way, if the material stretches or does any weird stuff, you can reclamp it the way it needs to be clamped in order to do what it needs to do, which is seal the combustion off from the cooling galleries and seal the combustion chambers off from one another and the side of the block. Personally, I've enjoyed watching Cleves McFarlane's YouTube channel since he's got a car, well, actually he has two cars that I find interesting. One they call Leroy, and the other one they call Ruby. Ruby is a Corvette with a truck junkyard V8, so it comes out of a truck like these, and it goes into a Corvette. So that seems interesting. Then he has Leroy, which is now doing about 250 horsepower that it's generating, which is what he started with was about maybe 900. What are those, ducks? I think they're ducks. They look like ducks. They didn't sound like ducks. Yeah, it's about 7 o'clock here. Anyway, I was talking about the bar earlier. That thing is the only reason that this rack here is able to support 500 kilos. Without it, it couldn't even support 100 kilos. Because whenever we had weight on here, the weight would literally, it'd be like a crowbar, a really huge crowbar, where the weight would just stretch it this way. And so we're trying to figure out where the stretch was. It was not here at this point, but rather it was in between here and here. And so that's how we knew the chassis was tenuating here, because there was something going wrong there, but that bar was doing what it was doing. It could also be, which I doubt, suspension-wise, but I doubt it, because from here to the tray, it's just solid chassis, and then you have the twisting. But that's why we put the bar there, because it was tenuating, or should I say flexing where it shouldn't flex. It was flexing here. That was bad. So that bar being there means it can take the weight and it won't come off too easily. There is 4 bolts holding the bar up, 2 bolts that side, 2 bolts that side, high tensile bolts. They're not coming off too easy, but they should be checked. I have to check the exhaust pipe isn't going to fall off, so I can't afford to replace that. And even if I could, you know, I would do it, but if I'm taking it off the road, it won't matter for a while. It doesn't look like it's falling off yet, which is literally, hang on, how do I point this out? So that's the exhaust there, and then it runs back there, and there's a cut point there because it's the exhaust broke off, and now we got a tube there with a clamp, and it's welded to one side of the exhaust, I think. And whenever the exhaust falls off, we just push it all back together, tighten up the U-bolt, and she's good to go. Now Tata here, I was going to clean this all up here in these little gutters, because I have these weird plastic things in there, and it was built up with so much dirt, and that there is a risk of building up rust. Now I don't know if you can see, but the clips are already rusty. There's cracks in the bog there, and the cracks in the bog mean that the water's going to go down there and crack the rest of the bog up, and it could be rusty in there, so you've got to clean it all out, put new bog in there, or silicone putty. There's the white Pajero that we're building the motor for at the moment in the shed. This is the Tata Telcaline. That looks wet inside that headlight, and that one looks clean, surprisingly. But I believe this one's wet looking because I tried to clean it up because it had lots of rust in there and dirt. So I washed it out with so many things. I even put oil in there because I didn't want it to rust anymore. So that could be a reason why it's like that. I watched another mechanic's channel. His name's Scotty Kilmer. And what he advises, if it's building up with water, to put a drill in the lowest point so then the water just drains out. It doesn't stay in there. That's cheaper than having to replace the headlight itself. Just put a hole in there, it's cheaper. So this is the white Pajero. It has electric windows. It has really nice, comfortable seats. The catch with this is the front 2 seats. They have the rear, what's it called? The seatbelt that retracts. The rear seats do not. They have literally adjustable ones, which are solid adjusters. And if you don't know how to adjust them, it makes it hard to sit in the back seat of the car. So that's the problem with the Pajero's seatbelts. The Triton MJ here needs its seatbelts rebuilt because they don't really retract very well. I mean, it could be the spring, or some guy said spray silicone spray on the seat bolts and then retract them and do that stuff. You know, pull it back and forth like this until it's loose using silicone spray. It's expensive stuff though. Birds. I think that's a dove because it's a white one. Dad has an XW that he's got to finish one day. he hasn't touched the car other than to move it in like 12 years, maybe. So it just sits there. I didn't know I could talk about cars. I thought there was more enthusiastic people out there. I wouldn't... In my childhood, I had a ZL that I really wanted to restore. And it's one of those cars that people kept dissing. They hate it. It's disgusting. It steers like crap. They made all the excuses under the sun to try and sway me from wanting one, but they didn't sway me, and I wanted to restore it. From my experience, I pulled it apart, tried to make repairs, and I felt really bad about making mistakes that I sort of was in a position where I stopped working on it. And the reason I stopped working on it is because, one, I didn't have money. I still don't have money. Two, my skills weren't sufficient to do the job well. And three, it was just making people get angry. So I made a decision that if I was going to restore it, I'd have my own place with a workshop. And if I couldn't do the job myself well, I'd get someone who's experienced with the skills to do the job for me, such as cutting and shutting panels, which were like, you'd need an engineer to certify them. You'd need to know the processes in order to fix something, take it to Regency, and pass. So that one was one of those things where it's like, yeah, an emotional attachment to the car. But I guess that helped me grow a bit, because when this car, I worked on it to get it running and keep it running, I kind of made a mistake with it where I sort of broke the head on the engine. And all I did was drive it out the driveway, drive it back up the driveway, and then the engine just broke down over there. All because I put the top caps for the bearings at the top of the motor in the wrong spot that it seized. So when you think about the cost of mistakes, you realize why you don't want inexperienced people working on your stuff. You need to literally be so experienced working on it in order to not make a costly mistake. That's what I kept calling it, costly mistakes. And that's why it's a good idea to respect your elders. Because if they know something, and they actually do know something, they can help you where you couldn't help yourself. And at times I have arguments with my dad. I've had arguments where I'm right, and I've had arguments where I'm wrong. The thing is, I always need an explanation on why this is going to work over my way, or why my way is going to work better over yours. But if you ignore me, we're going to keep having an argument until I prove, yeah, my way works. So, it does take a lot of experience to analyze why something's going wrong. And sometimes when you get a car in, I guess what you have to do is know how to analyze it. With this car, I have replaced the head gasket that many times within like a year. I gave up. The last time I did it, I just gave up. I was like, nah, if it's gonna die, let it die. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to solve this problem. And whenever I got help from mechanics, they were always wrong. And that was a bit of a pain in the ass, you know, when no one can tell you why you have this problem, and yet they keep saying that, oh, just replace the head gasket, here's a better head gasket than the one you can get. The thing is, in that scenario where they were really like, oh, you didn't need a better head gasket, you need this head gasket. The thing is, I followed their instructions once before and failed. So what I said to my dad is, right, we're going back to the manufacturer's handbook and we're doing everything by the book. We did everything by the book, and the mechanic said that he's going to get me a kit and it's going to be fine. That's all he said. Whereas I already got a head gasket and I just replaced the head gasket. Cost me about $40 to replace the head gasket the last time I did it. And the head gasket lasted a whole month before I had a problem with it. And that was an indicator that was lasting longer than before, which before it was only lasting about a week. But after, I took on some feedback from some other mechanics who have owned truck repair shops and knew a thing or two about the tolerances of diesel. Then I managed to, find ways to make it last longer. Probably didn't solve the problem, but it would have helped. So the problem is, this engine has high compression and low compression cylinders. The reason I say it that way is because if I lower the compression of the motor to make the high compression cylinders lower, the lowest compression cylinders, which are right where they need to be, will be so low that they won't do very well when running the engine. Essentially, the best way to describe what I just said is if I lower the compression of the motor, the high spots will be normal and the low spots will be very low. Whereas if I keep the compression the way it is, the high spots will be high and the low spots will be normal. So it's one of those things where it's a trade-off. You have the risk of the head gasket going in order to keep the car running with power that's killing itself, or you lower the compression to make it not cook itself, but it has so much less power that it can't run with enough power to get up the hills or do what it needs to do. So it does have the power to do what it needs to do now, but if I lower compression, it will have less power. One truck, two truck. All because they have a tray at the back. And all I call these is a ute, because from what I understand, a actual truck is bigger than these. This is bigger than this one, but it has a smaller tray. However, this one has a bigger tray and a bigger motor, and it's got more guts. This one has a 2-litre, that's what I got told. It's a 1.9-litre diesel engine, 2.5-litre diesel engine. And in my dad's car, which is behind this white Pajero, this one here has a V6 in it. And this is an MJ, this is a Tata. So go look up Tata. Try to find me a head gasket. I've already found one. It's too expensive. So yes, they are MJ Tritons. Well, this one is anyway. This one behind me is a Tata. So if we call this one behind me a Triton, I'm just going to start turning it into a joke. I might even get some chrome letters and just stick them on the back and say Triton. So then whenever someone sees the car and they're like, oh, that's a Triton? That looks like the weirdest Triton I've ever seen. And then when they see the hood emblem on it, it says Tata. It's like, huh? How is it a Triton and a Tata at the same time? Well, we can refer back to this stream, can't we? We have a nice feast. But I'm pretty happy with what I did to my tray in order to make it so whenever I was done with the straps and I finished strapping something down, just grab it, pull it, put it up here, grab the other end, pull it up, and then fold it together. And then I just pull the clamp, stick it in the clamp, and I'm done. That's the quickest way I have to get my straps out of the way without problems with the high winds pulling the straps out and alongside the vehicle, because that's going to attract some police attention. Yep, this Triton has been very, very good to me. I actually do like it. But I said earlier, this thing needs 12 grand spent on it. The exhaust needs replacing, the engine needs it rebuilt, the suspension needs rebuilding. I never mentioned this, but the tray needs rebuilding too. The tachometer, it doesn't read quite correctly. As in, like, the speed can be 60, but you're doing 54 or something. It's like 10% out. Okay, I'll make a bet on your Triton right now. I bet if you go look under the hood and you look where your, it's not thermostat housing, there's a hose that goes to your engine from the radiator. If you look there, there should be a pipe next to the head, and it should go into the housing that the pipe hooks up to. And if that pipe runs around the back of the motor, it goes to your turbo. And that means you've got a water-cooled turbo. And I only learned that with this one because it's a 95 Triton. It's near the end of the year, though, that this one was built. It's almost a 96. Okay. Yes, cooks up hills, but I've heard different stories, and I know why mine cooks. I can make mine not cook, but it requires the engine to be rebuilt. That's the thing. I don't know about your Triton, though, but the high compression, I believe it causes it to lean out a little bit, maybe. But I don't know because I haven't really looked into that. It's possible because mine's running high compression and low compression. If the engine's perfectly balanced, you shouldn't have any problems. But if it's not balanced, not quite right, it will cook itself. I know a guy with a Hilux 2.8 litre diesel, and he says he goes up the highways at like 130 and he has no problems uphill. This car, however, goes up the hills, it has lots of power, then it just loses it. And the reason it loses power is because the head gasket gets cooked every time. And that's because of the compression issues is part of the problem. The wrong coolant. So you just said yours cooks uphill. What kind of coolant did you put in yours? That's a question I got to ask because I think everyone can make the same mistake I made because it's so critical with these engines, the diesels. You put the right coolant in there. Because mine gets... Last time I went up a hill, it said 101 degrees. Anytime before it said 90. But that was with the head gasket blowing and pushing out coolant. Last time the head gasket held and the temperature said 101. And there's a few other reasons as well why the engine will cook. The fact is, you've also got the water-cooled variant. Okay. The best thing I can say with the coolant, if you haven't blown a head gasket, you might be using the right stuff. I believe you might be using the right stuff. There's a few things to do. One, you can put a high flow thermostat in your housing, which is on this side of the car, and that's where your water pump is. You take that off, you put the high flow Triton in there, and that's 77 degrees. It'll keep the temperature, it'll keep it pretty low. It'll keep it about 80 degrees. Then, if you check your radiator cap, it should be about 15-16 psi. What apparently that does is having a higher psi radiator cap is it keeps the boiling temperature lower. So, it raises the boiling temperature. So essentially, when your car's water hits 100 degrees, it won't boil with a high pressure radiator cap. Whereas if you have a normal or low pressure, it will boil over. That will cause a head gasket to fail. If you have a head gasket failure, that's bad. And the best way to check if you do have a head gasket failure is essentially put all the water from your overflow bottle back into the radiator and do some normal driving or drive up in Adelaide Hills and back. If your water is going up but not going back in the radiator, you probably have a blown head gasket. But if it pulls it back in, it might just be the fact that the water's expanded that much that when it cools down, it'll just pull the water back in that it needs. That's good. I replaced my radiator in my car and I've been thinking about deleting the heater core in the cab because it's got a hose in there underneath the where the steering column is underneath there, and that little hose has been leaking. So it's literally the green stuff there, but there's now a white powder there, and that tells me that's leaking. And it has the original hose clamps, which are like the spring ones where you put pliers on it and it like opens up. God. Yep. The stream just died. Just restarted, sorry. But yeah, I have the old spring clamps in mine under the dash. I heard that those hoses sometimes burst, and then you have water all on the floor. I was telling my dad, I was making a joke to him. Okay, when that hose lets go, the driver's gonna have, his feet are gonna get cooked because all this hot water is just gonna come out all over his feet when he's driving. That's a really good way to have a day, hey? Like you're going at 100 k's an hour and you're all over the pedals, and then the hose just blows, and then all this hot water is just pouring all over your feet. You can't even reach the pedals without getting cooked. Someone's gonna be a sad driver when that happens. I bet it's happened to someone once in their lives. Who knows? Yeah, I was making that joke. So, with your Triton, what can you tell me about the cooking? What have you noticed about your water and stuff to sort of give you an indication of any problems you might have? Like, does your water push out? Does it not pull back in? When you take the radiator cap off, is it low or is it high? Is there any of that stuff going on? I'm just waiting for a response. Last response was 2 minutes ago, lol. Actually, is this live chat? Okay. Just in case it's sort of gone back to being dumb and sending only certain things. Okay, when it's warm, is that at idle or just up hills? Like, can you tell how hot it gets? If you have a normal temperature gauge in the car, it doesn't tell you like the digits. Is it like down here before? There's like a little thing here that tells you where the cold spot is, and then when it's at operating temperature, there's like a little notch there, and then the needle goes up a little bit more. That's normal operating temperature. It's about 80 degrees there. When it's about 90, it's about straight up, and when it's 100, it's over here. So it literally gets to 100 when it's over there. From what I could tell with mine, and if it's honest with me, that is. Because I have 2 gauges in the car. And a mechanic made a joke about it. He said, like, it's, he called my car Irish. Because it's like 2 of everything. To be sure, to be sure. Sounds like this car's Irish. To be sure, but to be sure. I believe that's what he said. Okay, 90 degrees sounds really hot at idle. It might be an idea to check your fan. My dad's V6 needs a new fan apparently because that thing is flimsy. That's the guy who called my car Irish. He said that it needs to be replaced. Yeah. Mine doesn't sit on half. Mine has the high flow in it. Oh my god. Well, I'll tell you what, he said don't get oil on the clutch because then it will slip like the Dickens, essentially. That's what he said about oil in the clutch. If you get oil on it, it's just going to slip. This one here has an oil leak, but I don't think it's gotten to the clutch yet. Because mine doesn't slip. Mine actually looks like junk compared to Dad's. Dad's one looks really nice and neat, but his fan literally spins freely when he spins it, just a little bit, and then mine, it's stiff and stops. Okay. Okay, something sounds funky about your car being hot. When you had the head done, did they put on a stock head gasket? Because from what I can recall, does it feel like it's low on power? Does it feel like it's really high on power? Or does it feel low? Because when I did my head gasket, it felt really powerful. It felt really gutsy. Then a short time after that, when the head gasket went, it sort of felt, gutless. It still feels kind of gutless, but it still has its up and go moments where it's like wants to boot and keep going. In fact, today it had a tyre spin between third and fourth gear, which is unusual. Hi, Dad. Yeah, I'm just talking to someone about their MJ and their typing. So they have a problem with their engine cooking, but at idle it's 90 degrees, and when they're on the highway it's about 105.
Who are you talking to?
The rest of the world. Because he wants to be sneaky. Hi, Sneaky. Yeah, you stick your tongue out to the rest of the world.
Cool.
Yep.
You look like you got black eyes.
You do.
No, you do.
Or maybe it's just dark in the video.
It's dark. Oh, I got black eyes too. Can't see past your writing.
Yeah. So,
I've got a moustache.
by highway, do you mean up and down hills or just a flat road? Because I get confused with that stuff. Would you call a highway up and down hills, or would you call a highway just a flat road?
Salisbury Highway.
Okay.
You call that a highway? Who call that a highway?
Yeah. Is it like
road in the city?
110 k's on the hills or 110 k's on the highway?
Can you actually hear something?
No.
Are you talking to yourself, or you fucking...
No, I'm reading what they've said. Are you blind?
I'm blind. Yeah, I'm blind. They're texting you while you're talking.
Yep. There you go. You can take the barnacle away.
I can take it away.
Yep.
I can put your rubbish away.
Well, this is take away, after all. If I hit this button here, flat. Okay. So yours does hold 110 on the highway on the flat? Or it doesn't? Because with mine, it does. Even with a load, it does. It just struggles a little bit. Okay.
We're experts now.
Doesn't mean you're an expert, and doesn't mean I'm an expert. This is...
Clogged radiators are a problem.
You haven't been following.
Fans.
You haven't been following. He just said his whole cooling system has been cleaned and flushed, and I think you said you had a new radiator?
How good's his fan? Butch said my fan's
He's got a brand new fan as well. We've gone through it.
Okay. Has he got a compression leak?
As far as I heard, no. I don't
Has
think
he
he
had
said
the engine rebuilt?
I have no idea.
If he's had the engine rebuilt and they've done something wrong, it'll overheat and overheat and overheat.
There's no weird noises it's making.
You don't need weird noises. I could never run the 6-cylinder brand new one making South Cop. They're fucking overheated because
How about we turn that into a project? Let's bring it down. Let's see what went wrong.
I didn't hot tank the block.
You told me it did get cracked and you did have it welded up though.
No. When I initially put it together, I created 4x4 in back here, and it never ever ran the right temperature. It always overheated. I think they did something wrong with the motor. It was too tight.
Oh my god. See, even people who rebuild stuff break stuff. Okay. Did you measure the piston protrusion over the block? And get the right head gasket, because the standard head gasket is actually no good if you had the deck machined on your block or the head. Even though I never had problems with overheating or getting that hot at idle, it still is a contributor. Because the difference probably of yours and mine is mine has water damage. Unlike yours, it's probably going to be in better nick than this motor is. Though this motor can still hold 110 on the highway. I was thinking about getting another motor to, replace this one and then essentially rebuild this motor because it does need a proper rebuild. Because I know what's wrong with it. It's diesel?
Excuse me?
Yep.
Doesn't matter what it is. Your filter's blocked, you're running lean. Engine runs hot. Number one. There's fucking multiple reasons. It's a diesel.
Yep.
You changed the fucking fuel filter.
He's had the head replaced?
I don't care about the fucking head. I said fuel filter.
Have you replaced the fuel filter? What do you mean fuel pump?
You gotta check fuel filter, fuel pressure. Otherwise you're running lean. You're gonna burn any engine up if you haven't not put enough juice into it. Did you hear that?
He would have heard you, yeah. He's got one of these just like me, and I bet you he's got a water-cooled turbo just like me. We need to put a water-cooled one on your car. Modernize it a little bit. Maybe even get some roller rockers.
If the cooling system is perfect, including the thermostat, then you've got a problem with fuel. If you don't put enough fuel into the engine, it's gonna overheat.
Have you got a boost gauge? Actually not. The best boost gauge to know about is the one you use with your ears. If you're pushing your car really hard, the blow-off valve will blow. And that'll tell you you've got high boost in the manifold. I think it's like... Actually, I have no idea what the pressure in there is. He said the whole thing's been serviced. Fuel filter, air cleaner.
Yeah, but the jets haven't been touched. It hasn't been checked. These are jets. And you know what the worst part about it is? It's not just the jets.
It'll be easier if you came over here to talk.
$2,000 a pump itself.
Mm-hmm.
If the pump itself is failing to put the pressure to push the diesel into the pistons, you're running lean, you're going to overheat it.
Pump and injectors, that's what my dad just said. He says we're experts, but we're not really. We just have experience. Yeah, if we called ourselves experts, well, we would be expected of.
We've had lots of it.
We've just got experience.
We don't know how to test and check everything. But if it's running lean, it's going to run hot.
Of course it is. Just like mine does. But that's with the incorrect compression. Speaking of which, has your engine recently been compressed? Yep. Okay, well, that's a good one to check out. Okay. So, with the 10 psi thing, that's checking the boost pressures. From before it goes through the turbo, or maybe it is through the turbo. I'm not sure where the pressure is checked from for it, but it's literally any pressure in the turbo goes through the lines, and then it goes through your boost gauge, but it also goes through. They're not vacuum lines; they're actually pressure lines, from what I can recall, because the actuator valve that it operates the turbo for the what's the valve called in there again? I can't remember what the valve was. There's a valve on the side of the exhaust manifold, and it goes up and down just a little bit, and then there's a little stick that sticks down to it, goes on, clips on. It literally builds up the pressure and pushes out. Now, yours, probably about the same. Yep, the wastegate. So the wastegate valve, that's the thing that gets actuated by the actuator. If you're teeing off from there and measuring the pressure from there, I'm not sure if that's the actual manifold pressure or not. So that's just the pressure in those lines, probably. I haven't got a clue because I haven't actually looked that thoroughly, being honest about that. But that's with mine, it runs about 6 psi now. It used to say 10, but now it says about 6. And it runs fine. It could be because I've got longer lines in the car, because I literally replaced them and put different ones in because I wanted to do something with the lines, I think. Could be wrong. I don't really remember, unfortunately, about that one. But that's how mine's measured, and mine says 6. It used to say 10, but now it says 6. And they're literally the mosquitoes are out here chasing me. Go away, mosquitoes. So I could cheat. I could put this in my pocket for a minute and take my food inside before I get eaten alive by these mosquitoes. Jeez. So I apologize for the black screen that you are now seeing, but we are house. Window down. And you'll now start to hear birds chirping, and you'll hear voice knocking. Hey Dad, the mosquitoes are getting me.
What?
I just said the mosquitoes are getting me.
Oh,
Yeah, that is cool, isn't it?
okay.
Okay, that's front door done. Now we can be back.
Okay, shut. My door shut.
Yep.
Okay, I've got another proposition for you. When you coming.
Well, his name is Truckman15 Oz. So if you have a proposition, feel free to speak out loud.
No, not for this guy.
What's it for?
No, something else.
Okay, something else. If you're talking about, oh, I can drive on your motor while mine gets refunded.
No! I'm not talking about cars, sorry. This one's totally.
Are you talking about dinner? Oh, now I've got hiccups.
Don't be smart.
Not being.
You are.
I was taking
No.
guesses on what your proposition is. Because I don't know what it is. You just said you have a proposition, but what?
I'm not talking to you.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to fucking offer it to you later
Cool.
when you finish.
Okay. Well, the cooling system on those things is really... Now I've forgotten the word. it's critical. If you get something wrong, it does have a bad effect on the motor. Mine is reading out 10, sorry, not 10, it's reading 80 degrees. If you really want to do that, you could always do a compression test on the motor and make sure she's all good. Because if...
Have you done the Coca-Cola test?
What Coca-Cola test?
So we put the bottle on there and bloody fill it up, the bubble keeps coming out.
He doesn't need to do that.
Well, then he's got a problem with it's got to be fuel and air mixture. If the fuel and air mixture isn't right, it's going to run hot.
Yeah. Actually, thinking about it, I think he said it struggles to hold 110. I think he said it struggles to hold 110 on the highway.
Not enough fuel, not enough air.
It could be retarded timing.
Timing on a diesel?
Yeah. The injector pump.
The belts. The cogs.
The bumps.
The belts, the cogs. That's another fucking scenario again.
The thermostat for the diesel is 82 degrees. I've got a 77 degree one in there.
Hey,
and that's what roughly it should be running.
If he's out one or two teeth on the belts, camshaft belts, it'll fuck it up too.
There's so many things you could check, but
so many.
If it feels underpowered, it could tell you a story. If it's very underpowered, I would check your timing probably if it's underpowered. But if it feels like it's got power,
if the belt's not in the right position, it's gonna run hot. It's gonna run hot.
And melt your pistons.
And in terms about the round belts and the square belts, you put the wrong one on, it's gonna be fucked.
Why would I need to bring that one up?
Because you said you've got the same car as yours.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you put the wrong belt on there, you're fucked.
Out in the belt. I don't quite think I understand. It just said, yeah, I was out on the belt. I felt that lol. I'm not sure I understand what he means. Out on the belt.
My son's so good, he's pulled his down 10 times and put it back together again.
Well, that's true.
And I'm so good.
And I do it on my own.
And I'm so good.
He wants to talk about a $1,500 job he done with backyard tools.
Hang on. Oh, that one, that's a different story. I wasn't going to talk about that one.
My dad's so good that he put an injector pump together he has no idea about. Oh yeah, him and his boss machined a Pajero gear to suit my car just so that I could have a gear because
they got the same teeth on them, but they run a square belt.
Yep. My dad's a bragger too, by the way, if you haven't noticed.
Oh, fuck you too.
Yeah, unfuck you.
We make things fit.
It's nice to have all these resources around you to fix a car. Even if you don't know what you're doing.
I talked about Repco and the belts, fuck. They didn't even want us. They wouldn't let us open up the boxes.
They opened them.
Oh yeah, they did, but they didn't let us touch them.
That's okay. We took pictures instead.
And I didn't bring my mags along, so I couldn't work out whether it's going to fit or not fit.
They literally have a short belt and a long belt. And Dad's is essentially the shorter belt. Mine's the longer belt. 83, 87 teeth on yours. And mine's about 97, 98 belt teeth on the belt.
But that wasn't a problem. is
The tooth.
the shape of the belt.
Mm.
Either wraps around or it don't wrap around.
Yeah, that's what we do. To identify if the timing belt's right, well, one, if your timing belt was wrong, your car would already be broken right now. You wouldn't have been able to turn over the motor without destroying something. Because the timing belt that I've got for him, hopefully, once upon a time, we essentially tried to change gears on my car and it didn't work. Something wasn't right. The teeth weren't lining up. But also my gear cracked and that almost let go. So it has 4 legs on it and literally it broke where it bolts onto the camshaft. So we had to get another gear. They machined it and now it's on my car driving the car, and that's thanks to a Pajero.
Good question. He puts his foot on the foot to the floor. Does it blow black smoke or not?
Every diesel does that.
Hang on. You're asking the question. No, not every diesel does it. If it's not blowing black smoke, it's running lean. We forgot something, Michael.
That's kind of true.
Kind of true. That's dead right. It's kind of true.
When the manifold pressure is high enough, it will pump more fuel into the engine.
Yeah. And if he's not blowing any black smoke, he's running lean.
His
Which will create
his
heat.
blows black smoke under load. Remember, Graham said this to us. If it's overfueling in a diesel, it'll cook itself. Your Graham. The Graham who did the 4M40 and put the bolt in there. No blow valve, just a bolt. He capped it off.
You're going to stories now.
I'm not telling stories. That's actually, he showed us. He capped it off. And he blew black smoke down the road.
There's also an oxygen sensor in the exhaust pipe that
No.
needs replacing.
No. Yours does. Ours does not.
Oh, you don't have an oxygen sensor. Okay, all right.
Yep. It's unfortunate there's mosquitoes out there. We can't go look under the hood of that damn dirty diesel. Dad has the V6. I have the 4D and
Hang on a sec, I
the
have fucking both.
483DL. Okay, you have a 4D, but yours is in bits and pieces. His ran good though. I was saying I think he's got more guts than mine, but when I was driving mine around, I was like, you know, I'm not even sure which one has more guts. I think Dad's has more power than mine, but when I was driving mine after a while, I was like, yeah, this thing's got more guts than Dad's. But I haven't had a chance to compare the two because his is in bits and pieces.
Mine's getting rebuilt.
Mm-hmm. The bottom end bearings. And your balance shaft bearings.
Which weren't even running when we drove it back from
Mhm.
Adelaide.
Yep. If you pull a motor apart and you find that it's got lots of sideway play in the piston.
And a blown head gasket.
Hmm.
Remember, the oil's pissing outside.
Yep. But if you find there's sideway play in the pistons, instead of having to rebuild the engine, put in new sleeves, you can rebuild the engine, put new pistons in that are oversized to whatever dimensions you make the cylinder. Although that's what Dad's doing. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep mine as stocky as possible because those cylinder liners are so thin. They're probably about as thin as this knife. That's how scary thin they are. And that's why I don't want to risk it. That's how thin they look to me. Because if the piston wears through the side of that cylinder liner, or there's corrosion and rust on the other side of the liner, it's eating its way through and it penetrates into the cylinder, there's not going to be a good outcome to that. Very, very bad. Mum's just playing with her griffin in her game. I bet on that it's true, because Datsun is a really good brand. Before Nissan was its rebranding image, which cost them a lot of money, and then eventually one day Nissan done a merger with Renault, and now they are a French-Japanese car manufacturer that made crappy cars for a long time.
That's it.
I have no idea why my dad's complaining. I thought he was helping.
Do you even have a throttle body?
No. It does not control airflow, it's just controlled through the injector pump.
Again, if the coolant system is perfect, it's fuel and air mixture. Maybe you got a vacuum hose somewhere.
I'm not sure about that one.
You lose vacuum.
It might be a good idea to pull the injectors out and just check what they look like on the other side, see if they're sooty or not. Maybe even take them down to the diesel shop and get them checked. You can't check hoses that don't exist. What vacuum hose is going to control its air-fuel mixture? There's nothing.
There's nothing. You know it better than I do.
Yeah. The only thing that controls it is if you're boosting really hard, that pumps more air and fuel into the engine. And if you're controlling the throttle, that controls the pump. So the way Dad's essentially talking is the best point to check is anything related to the fuel system, because that's the only thing you can regulate with your foot pedal.
But if his camshaft could jump 1 tooth out, it's never going to run right. If his belt is out 1 tooth and someone put it together, they put it out 1 tooth, it's going to run red hot. It will never fucking work.
And the easiest way to check if your belt's out, just take the top cover off, put it to its top dead center point from the crank, check if all the points line up.
It's out, and that will cook the fucking motor. If someone put the belt on wrong, and it's easy to do, isn't it, Michael?
Says the guy who done 180 degrees out of timing.
That's bullshit. That's a lie. That's a lie. That was Graham's bullshit story from my distributor being fucked. He told me that story and I almost believed him. Well, I did believe him for a while. Now you're full of bullshit. You gave me another distributor. You put a new distributor in here? Nah, you're a fucking liar.
A mechanic told him he got the timing out 180 degrees when he came out to look at the car.
Bullshit. It was bullshitting me. He gave me a new Dizzy. Oh, sorry, not new Dizzy.
Good on you, mate. He just said the timing belt marks are lined up. Did the pump ever come off the car And did it go on exactly, precisely in the same position it came off in? Or did it get taken off and bolted straight on? Because it does have an adjustment where the pump can be tilted so many degrees, in which the timing for when it's at top dead center and all that stuff is off. So whenever you're fueling the injectors, it will be fueling at a point essentially that could be after or before top dead center.
His pump's out. No one set his pump up. I guarantee you. No one said
My dad makes guarantees that he can't
blah,
claim.
blah, blah, blah.
He is such an expert, mate.
Okay, sorry.
You never ever say that. You can't guarantee that's going to work, because if you guarantee it, you know, it's guaranteed you'll get your money back.
I'm full of shit.
He is. You need to go to the toilet and dump it. Oh, now we're up to last bite. Might with the cat. And I've been eating my dinner while Dad's been, just sitting here with his dinner right there on the cooktop.
Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah.
Blubber. And this is almost empty, so that's good. Then I'm going to grab the cats and we'll go look under the hood. I think that's probably a good idea.
You're not gonna find fucking shit. You haven't got a car.
It's not my car that's cooking. My car's fine. Okay. Whether it's worthless or not, we can do that. And by cats, I mean these things are so bright that they're perfect for working on cars, and they look very industrial looking, very bright. I like them a lot because they work really well, and because they're also magnetic. I'm just shining it at the door. I'm not even shining it at myself. All that bounding light, that is just so bright. I gotta be proud of my lights, mate. That light is just so powerful. It just reaches everything. I wonder if it reaches... Oh my god. It reaches the backyard. That light is so bright. That's just one of them. Imagine what we can achieve with 2 of these. Probably light up the whole shed with them. But it does feel a little bit warm. Oh, and they've got rechargeables in them now, so I guess that helps. Come on. Listen to the insects. Now we're back out here in the dark, where all the bugs and the mosquitoes are flying around making a mess. I wonder... I haven't tried this yet. Oh, I've tried that before. Now I have keys in my back pocket, so I might be able to go and investigate my Triton to try and help you with yours. But it is the water-cooled variant, so it shouldn't have the same exact problems as mine. Because my problem is the compressions are wrong, so it's not good on mine. Also, mine has a bit of a dodge job here because I don't have an AC. I literally have this misting line in order to mystify my car. So if I literally turn this on, there you go. I don't know if you can see the mist, but I literally have mist jets in the car just to keep me cool. It's a bit silly, but it's a bit smart at the same time, especially when it's hot. You can just turn them on and get cool, rather than, getting so hot that you don't have no way to cool down. So at least I have a way to cool down now. So now I've got to pop the hood, which is going to leave you in the dark for a minute. So I might as well look at the stars instead. Yeah, the mister actually works. The problem is if you have computers and stuff, it's good for them. So, just to note, all this oil on the hood is not from the engine specifically, but it's more from the power steering. It literally goes on the drips on the belt down there. If you can see the shiny spot on the belt, it literally drip on the belt, and then the belt slips like crazy when you start it up. So this is what mine looks like. It has a different pump in it because my pump kind of leaked, and then I tried to replace all the seals. I'm just making sure there's no spiders that I'm going to step on or have crawling up my pants. So this here is the pump. There is about 4 bolts that hold its position. There's 2 bolts. I got to put this somewhere proper. Okay, so there's 1 bolt somewhere here where my finger is. There's another bolt on that side of the pump. And yeah, it would look exactly the same as yours. The pipe that I was talking about is for the water cooling for the turbo, is this pipe here. It runs from this housing here, and it runs alongside the housing, but from the housing. So it's like that little hose there that's got a hose clamp. Should do. I can't barely see it though. So there's a hose clamp, there's the hose with the rubber. Rubber runs alongside, and then it ends up, I can't even get a good position here. And then it runs all the way around the back of the motor to the turbo. Now this thing isn't perfect, and that's mostly because its engine is kind of damaged internally speaking. So it's got to be fixed eventually. It's got a brand new wiring loom. Yeah, yours should do have, if it's the same sort of year, where's my year? So mine was built in the 11th month of 1995, so mine's an MJ 1995, and you can see it right there, MJ 1995, there's more than enough details there. But yeah, that hose, that pipe should be in yours. This one here, with the mountain runs that I've been doing, it's only just below full, so that's a good thing. This thing is still warm, but I can hear some sloshing in there. That means there's some air in there. I can't get rid of all that air, unfortunately. I'm having problems with that. So on this side we have those turbo lines. So this one here controls if there's more fuel going to the motor or not. So if you're boosting the crap out of your car, this actuator valve here activates, in which operates the wastegate down there on the motor. And if you're boosting and she's cooking on the boost, maybe your fuel pump is not pumping enough pressure to your injectors. Or there is a restriction in your injectors or lines that are causing these things here, which are easy to tell what they are, the injectors. It's causing the injectors to not be able to pump enough gas. So in the event this decides to start falling apart, it will push out metal particles through these steel lines. And if it does that, you're in trouble, because if that steel gets in the injectors, they're going to get blocked. They're not going to operate correctly. Be careful of that one. Also, they say that these things stop it from breaking, so those things are important. Yes, they do. They do piss out oil when unplugged. But you also don't leave them out, because these things have to always be flowing. If you hold pressure in the line, you might even break your line or push oil out somewhere else or do damage to the pump. So having all those things connected is a good idea. You could always get one of these lines, maybe, but they're high pressure lines, just remember that. You might be able to put like a hose on the end and run it back to the tank or something. It's because that once they're at pressure, then there's pressure there. But beforehand, when you're bleeding the system, there's literally not that much pressure. It doesn't squirt everywhere, it's just pumping fuel. That's all it's doing. But once there's pressure built up behind those injectors, then they squirt. They don't squirt until there's pressure there. Okay. So when Dad's talking about timing, if this thing is tilted either or, it will literally have timing after top dead center or before top dead center. That is what's controlling your timing, and it's independent of the timing belt. So once all those timing marks are lined up, this thing is different. This thing's separate. So if this thing got unbolted, you need to put it back with the right timing. And the way you do that is there's this bolt. It's roughly where my finger is, in the middle of the pump here. You have to get a gauge, a special one that pushes in there or screws in or whatever. It screws in, and then what you do, from what I can recall, you tighten it in, and then you turn the motor over, I think it was, or something, until you find top dead. Or sorry, no, you don't turn the motor over, you leave it where it is. Then you turn this while it's loose till you get to a certain point where it says in the manufacturer's book, this is the specs for your motor. Once you get there, you tighten the bolt there, and underneath there's some bolts down here that you have to tighten up. And then she's timed. If that's not right, you could have the problem my dad was talking about. The problem I have with this, this is a brand new radiator. That is a shitty old fan, but it has resistance in it. It has plenty of resistance in it. It stops. Dad's just spins. It has a high flow down there in the thermostat housing, and it runs really, really sweet. I'm happy with it. I have no problems to argue about other than it needs a rebuild. If I rebuild this motor, she'll be sweet, which will be good. But we have all these other little things to worry about, such as the hoses down here, where all the blue stuff is. Wherever there's blue, it's mostly leaks. And I could replace those hoses with new ones, then put hose clamps, proper hose clamps in their place. They'll fix some issues. I've redone a lot of this wiring loom because of this loom getting rubbed out, and that was bad. And there's all that oil all over this brand new wiring loom. It just goes to tell you that I ain't bullshit when I say there's oil leaks that I can't just straight up fix. That's been in there about 2 weeks, I think. So that's what it looks like after 2 weeks of being in the car. Bloody messy. What's the point in cleaning your car when it's just dirty every week? Now, I locked the car. I shouldn't have locked it. There's a few things I can point out about it. If you have a bad motor, I learnt this recently. There's the harmonic rhythm of it. If it sounds, there's a few things to identify by harmonic rhythm. Okay, so I know only a little bit about it, but I'm gonna put down the lights. Harmonic rhythm is essentially when the engine is running, everything's working as it should be, and it's all running synchronously. If it's not synchronously running, then its harmonic rhythm is off, and you'll notice the harmonic rhythm because harmonics is essentially sound, but there's more to it than just sound. So essentially, the way to identify if there's a problem with your motor, there's a few things. One, this mirror here will vibrate at different speeds. I learnt that today because when I was driving at like 1600 RPM on this gauge here, I'm doing maybe somewhere between 60, 80, 60, 100, something like that. This mirror would vibrate in a certain RPM. But when you were listening to the motor, it also had different resonance when you were revving it. So it sounded different every time. So what I'm going to do, a bit of a smart ass at the moment, this thing just fires up. It's very easy to start, even without, got to find my key. I know it's probably not worth starting up, but we're going to turn it on anyway. There's the temp sensor. It's actually going to tell us what the temperature is. And it's still cold. And there's our oil light, and it just went off. We have oil pressure, squeal belt. I don't know if you noticed this. but that's where idle is meant to be. But if you notice at about 800 RPM to 1000, there's a bit of harmonic rhythm there. And then it just nice and neatly stops. So if I look at this mirror, we might be able to see it, we might not be able to see it. But I can hear it, it's like a dipping sound. So yeah, I can hear it about there. So in the 1600 to 1800 RPM range, you can sort of hear it changing. That's because of the damage in the motor. It's sort of hard to hear, but you can hear it. Barely. But the temperature gauge here, when she's at the right temperature, I'm trying to put this back somewhere, or better still, just turn on the gauge cluster. When she's at operating temperature, that little needle is just after that little lip, so it's about there-ish, maybe even earlier, about there. But when she's at 90, she's about middle, straight up and down, so she'll be aligned with that little line there. And when she's at 100, she'll be more over to this white line here, but she won't be at the white line. But if she's about 110, 120-ish, she'll probably be on the red marker, no problem. She'll cook, and that's bad. So I'm guessing 105, you're sitting on this white line here, because I haven't gotten to 105 yet. I've gotten to 101, which is back there a little bit, it's before the white line. So I'm guessing you're at the white line there. Now I think I should just turn all this stuff off. But I think that makes a bit of sense. A little bit at least. So that gauge, those two gauges there, temperature gauge goes from 0 to 20, and the boost gauge goes from 0 to 30. My boost gauge goes to about 6, which is about the middle. I don't have a light on it, but essentially it goes to about there. Okay. That might make sense. I replaced my unit in my car because mine was reading bad. When you go to start up your car, does your glow plugs activate? Because when mine was broken, it would just do it all the time, and I'd be driving it. There's a bloody mosquito in here. And now I hear an ambulance or police or something. So, your glow plugs do turn on when it's dead cold, or they don't. Or does it go click, 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 click? I think this one will click now. If we listen. That click. That click. Does your car have that click? That freaking mosquito, I swear, he needs to go away. They're not getting my blood. No click. Okay, if you're not getting a click, my advice would be to do what I've done. Put in a gauge like this one here that goes from 0 to 120, because that's brand new and reliable. Okay, so I put in my gauge, not knowing because I'm not knowing what the temp was on my car. So because mine doesn't tell you the temperature, I've now got a borderline to tell me what the temperature is. Now mine was giving me crap. So the sensor here, this sensor right here where the wire is, I'm going to pull the wire off. If you pull it off, that solves a lot of problems in your dash cluster and it stops you from clicking. But if your temperature is reading wrong, it's either the wrong sensor or your wires, the wires themselves are getting so hot that there's creating resistance. The higher the resistance, the higher the temperature is going to be. So if you lower that resistance, you should be okay. But the reason there's tape on them is because the wires are damaged. That sender was replaced a little while after I put in this one because it was broken. Okay. Before you put a new one in, was it reading as high, or when you put a new one in, it was reading higher than usual? But like I was trying to say just now, to note, you need to insulate those wires and make sure they're not touching anything hot. As soon as those wires build up with resistance, like heat, they'll add resistance and they will lie about your temperature. Because the higher the resistance, the hotter the engine is. That's the thing. That's how the gauges know that the engine's at temperature or even hotter. So before you go reading less, oh, okay, I guess that's a good thing. But these wires here are so critical as well for you to know what the temperature is. They're running somewhere they shouldn't, or they're damaged. Say for example, they're not the right size wires. If they're the wrong size in one point or another, just because they look right, doesn't mean they are right. And that's because of the damaged spots. I have damaged spots up here, but they haven't broken through the wire. They've just broken through insulation. If they're damaged, like the copper is damaged and have one strand left or something, that's a high resistance point. That means that your gauge is going to be reading out from dead cold. When your car is dead cold, it should be just like mine. It should be something along the lines of 0. So, in a way, you know, I'm not so concerned. I'm not so worried about your car as you are yours. I think maybe it might be a good idea to just put in another gauge. You should have the ability to put in a temperature gauge like in the side of mine here. So this little unit here, for 20 bucks, you can put this in your car with the gauge that I have in the car, wire it all up to your accessories, and then you should see what your car is actually, what the temperature is. Otherwise, get a heat light, put on this thing here, and then you'll see what the temperature of that pipe is there. It shouldn't be as hot as you said it is. No way. Because you said it's getting hot. Okay. Actually put one in the car, or you haven't, or you still yet to put it in, because I'm getting a vibe that's probably what you should do. Put one of them in the car. You'll have 2 readings to be sure. Make all these Japanese cars Irish, and that says 105. Okay. Well, I'm going to be frank. When I had my gauge in my car, it lied to me about the temperature, all because the wires got hot. Because the wires were touching things they shouldn't have, like the head. If the wires touch the head, they cook, they add resistance to the system thinks it's hot, so it tells you a higher temperature than it actually is. So, depending on what the resistance of your wires is, it could be good, it could be bad. I'm going to actually put one of these lights back out here, back on my cupboard. The best picture I ever got of my Triton before she looked like crap. And before we put on the racks, that looks beautiful. Love that thing. Just because she goes really, really good. But we have wire all over the place. Dad's car's got auto electrical problems, so the wiring is still all the stuff out here. I've done to my car, wires, Dad's car. Essentially what you need to do when you use wires, to be sure that you're not going to cook them, get some conduit and maybe even some heat shrink. Put it in the heat shrink first, then feed it into the conduit. And then the conduit will protect the wires from getting too hot that they will give a false reading. That's what was car because I had those problems. I was having the wires were touching spots and reading out the wrong temperatures. Now, this wire here might be okay, but I'd say it's too thin. It will give a false reading. The thicker your wire, the more likely it's going to get the reading from the sensor itself rather than the wire for what the resistance actually is. Also, there you go. There's the Tata Telco line. That's how bad the compression is on that thing for it to be gutless. Okay, well that's good then. You at least know how hot the thing is. I'm not sure, but here you go. That's what a pump looks like. This one was going to get rebuilt, and this one here is going on Dad's motor because it's brand new. And this oil filter's here because I was going to cut it open and see what my oil's like in my car. Because it's one of my last ones from my oil change. I want to know how much silver's in there. But there's a thermostat. On the thermostat, it literally says somewhere. Actually, I can't even read this one. I might even turn on the light. They're all a little bit different, but this one's a 82 unit. There you go. So that's what the temp should be when it opens. The one that's in my car right now is 5 degrees less than that. Freaking all these mosquitoes. But that's your temperature right there for this unit. The other one is a 77 degree one. Well, that's quite interesting because I don't know of any 72 degree temperature high flows. I only know of the 82 and 77. I know now about an 86, I think. That's Tata. Okay, you know, I tell you what. We've got another 40 in the shed we can look at. That's still in bits and pieces and we haven't put it back together again. Get some ideas off of that. I only turn on the front, I didn't turn on the back. Whoops. So if I go back here, here's our other 4056 that's in bits and pieces that we're still working on. But Dad needs bearings to the bottom end, that's why the crank's in the bag. The pistons are on the cover. Look at those beautiful new pistons. Yeah, this one's been rebuilt. It's been honed. Well, not honed, it's been line bored. And we've been checking all the bearings out. And there's school marks in some of them, which is not good. Not good at all. So, I think it was more on the bottom though. This one here is the critical one here. If this one's out, then that's bad. We can't check it sideways, but internally it is too small. It's too sloppy. There are all the numbers that we ran from the measurements that we did with the tools we have. And you get all your numbers. Can't explain it, don't need to explain it. But we have the turbo, which is not water cooled. This is the not water cooled variant. That's an oil line. The coolant line is normally on the back face, and then there's normally another one to push water back out another way. I don't remember it very well, but here's the head, injectors. There is no hole. Actually, there is a hole here. Dad's housing looks different, but the hole here is normally for something else. So, what we see here is the temp sensor, and this one's for the transmission. I don't remember exactly why, but it's transmission one or kick down or something, because it's automatic. We have our injector pump. I was trying to say something about that before, but I couldn't show you. So there's an adjustment hole here. There's an adjustment bolt over here. Then you have these two tilting ones here. So there's a total of 4. No, it doesn't matter. The water-cooled ones, they can spool a bit quicker because they don't get so hot that they tighten up. That's what I heard. And the water-cooled ones can spin a lot faster, a lot quicker because they're not so tight. Square tooth, because it's Pajero. And it has all the extra fancy things that go with an automatic. Okay. Oh, by the way, when we talk about building a motor, we get so serious that we look at the heads of the bolts and we can see like a rainbow at the heads. That means the engine at this point here got to about a 300, 400 degree temperature, which could be bad for the bolts because they might snap off there. And that's bad. If they snap off, that's bad. We're thinking about replacing with socket heads, then they won't snap off. If there's a chance those ones will. So literally, we're going over everything and checking everything as we go, because that discoloration, like on those bolts there, shouldn't be there. So if we find any more discoloration, it tells a lot about what's wrong with the engine. Yeah, my head bolts were rusty too. We snapped them, we welded them, and then we screwed them out to get them out, and we even have broken stuff. Okay, it reconnected finally. Okay. Yep. The Aussie internet does break too much. It's annoying. This car sounds interesting that you've got with how it's doing stupid things with getting too hot. That would be a really interesting one to actually go ahead and diagnose. If no one's diagnosed it for you, that'd be an interesting project, figuring out someone else's problem. Since it's like a familiar thing to know a lot about them, you can just walk up to the car with all this extra knowledge and say, yes, we can do this, no, we can't do that. I don't actually have the tool myself to check the injector pump. That'd be a good one to go and head and measure. It sounds like there's a chicken out. Someone's making noise. Or something is. Maybe there isn't chickens making noise. Anyway. No. Okay, well, I guess this should conclude the stream then. Or maybe it shouldn't. We'll see. But I don't know if you're back. I know I'm back, kind of. Until the internet cuts out again. It normally cuts out in the shed all the time. I just walked out, walked back in, walked out, walked back in. I guess it is a bit shit having to do that. But that overheating one would be a good one to diagnose, because it doesn't sound like anything that I have with mine. Mine doesn't overheat that hot. It literally, those gauges are pretty accurate on my car, even though they're cheap. It doesn't get nearly that hot. It hasn't gone into the red yet. But I have things to compare against, and I have things to know about. And my car doesn't push out coolant. Yeah, hot means bad. But with a turbo diesel, they do get a little bit hot, because it's a turbo and a diesel. If you have a normal diesel, it won't get nearly as hot as a turbo, because that's the extra part of the equation. If you want to know if it's normal for your car to get hot, in a turbocharged car it gets a little bit hotter because it's using the turbo and working the turbo. So that thing gets to like 30,000 RPM or higher, and that thing will make your temperature rise about 10 degrees from what I could understand. And then that water, that heat transfers through other things as well. Then the engine has to take the extra load, not just the heat of the turbo heating up. The air gets hot. The engine has to work with that air fuel mixture, and if it's not quite right, it is, because you can lean out a diesel a lot more than you can a petrol. If it leans out a little bit, it is going to get a bit hotter. But a diesel can tolerate it a lot more than a petrol engine can. Yeah, because it's non-turbo. But that's good. Yours sits at 80. Mine sits at 80, but when I give it load, it gets up 90. In some places, it gets up to about 101. That's going to Mount Barker. I don't know, you're in South Australia? Because if you're in South Australia, you might know about that road to Mount Barker. Last time I drove up it, I was trying to be gentle. Yeah. Last time I drove up that road, I was being gentle, trying not to push the turbo. It still got up to about 101 degrees. The reason for my engine in rebuild is because it gets hot like that for no reason. It doesn't have the reason to get hot. But it does have a reason to get hot, and that's because compressions aren't right. The engine's not running synchronously. And when the engine's under load, it's loading itself up because of the parts inside the engine aren't quite right. Parts in the engine being the cylinders, the piston rings are damaged from cylinder liner damage. The cylinder liners have damage. I can't sit on my bed properly and rest my butt. And I got my boots on still, so I don't really want to get dirt all over my bed. So, but mine is mostly just cylinder damage. Then I need a new head on my car. That's to lower compression, and then I can put on the standard head gasket, maybe. But I can't put on a standard head gasket because in the manual it says something about different measurements, like different variables. Now I've got this laptop here, except I'm lifting the whole thing rather than just the lid like I wanted. And if you really want, I can go read the manual and tell you what the thickness of gasket is for whatever, because it says in the manual. But the standard head gaskets, all the gaskets you get these days are wrong. They're not OEM. And the reason they're not OEM is if they were OEM, they'd be following this manual with their manufacturing tactics rather than doing what they've been doing. No, for compression test, you take out the glow plugs. But when you do this compression test, you disable the injector pump. You make sure that you take off the glow plugs wire that makes them fire. Or instead of taking off that wire specifically, you have to take it off anyway. You have to disable the glow plug relay, which is behind the battery in the front left of the car. So it's on the passenger side near the headlights. You unplug just one wire and it's like a spade terminal and you're good to go. So apparently I have new mail from the bank, which is interesting. I didn't expect to get one here. So when I said I do things by the book, it is literally to try and work around the problems. Yes, that's how you do the compression test. For my engine, it was about 14 seconds. Turn it off, check it. But the problem is you need two people. One to read the gauge while the other guy's cranking. Because what you could do other than that as well is maybe get one of those starter buttons. Read the gauge while you press the starter button. Then you don't have to worry about the gauge releasing pressure so quickly that you don't see it. So you need a good pair of eyes. You need to be constantly reading that gauge, and when she doesn't go any higher than a certain number, that's your number that you want to take. Take that number, you put it you take that number, you write it on paper for that cylinder, and then you go with that. Now, going with what I've just said, my engine's 13.4% out of spec. There's a Tata out there that's 27.5% out of spec. Nah, it doesn't work like that. To build up compression quick enough, you need to be actually running the engine. To run the engine, you need the starter motor. You can't do it by hand, it won't work. You can try though. I have faith in you to just give it a shot. But if you're running out of pressure so quickly in your tool, you're not going to get very far. So, 4D, 56. 91 to 93 and subsequent. No, that's 1991 to 1993. That's Dad's. 1994 and subsequent. So subsequent being from 1994 onwards. So this applies to our engines, yours and mine. Okay. So I can change the camera. So this is your manual that you get, and there's 92 pages in this. If I scroll down to nearly the bottom, there's specs in there. I have no idea why it's there. So that's the oil, bearings, and there's your notches for, that's OD of your bearings. So it literally tells you your bearings. Here you go. This is telling you about your limit. So if your pistons are protruding this much, that's the maximum you can have protruding. If it's any higher than this number here, you then need to shave your pistons down because that's too much protrusion. Where is the numbers that tell you your head gasket? How do you know what head gasket to put on? It's in this manual. I've read the manual plenty of times. Unless it's just in the old manual. This manual should have those numbers as well. But it could be it repeats information. Piston and the gap. This thing seems almost useless when you look at it like this. I've read the manual, it tells you head gasket stuff. That's oil pump, so now we're going too far past. There's meant to be a little table to the side, it could be in the other one, which tells you your size for your head gasket. This fell out. Yeah, this is probably the wrong manual, but you do all these measurements like above, top, center. They're measuring the bearings and telling you what the gauge is. That's the block. That's your values. Your limit is 0.1. Your standard value is 0.05. So if you have any low spots and it's about that much, that's okay. If it's about this much, you have to machine the deck or something, or replace the block, which the manual sometimes says to do. Where are you? I'm looking for... Look at that. It's literally showing that cutout there, and it looks like a damaged cylinder liner. Here we go, piston protrusion. So I believe this is for our engines, but I don't trust this manual. I have another one that's not subsequent. 91 to 93. I think there's one that predates 91 as well, but I'm not sure I could find it. Or maybe I do have it, I just don't remember where. But the tools, sometimes you need the tools, and if you don't have the tools, you have a problem. Piston protrusion. Come on, where is that chart? There's a table that says this is the thickness of your head gaskets. It could be in another section, because I remember reading it. I'm sorry, this thing is just ridiculous to go looking through. I feel like I need two fingers, one on the mouse and the other one to just raise up. It's also loading pretty slow as well. But the table literally says this is the thickness gasket for this dimension. And that was helpful for me in identifying what thickness head gasket I actually needed. And I knew it was down the bottom, but there was, in some cases, there was a couple of them. There wasn't just one. There was a couple of pages of the same sort of thing. Without turbocharger, with turbocharger, connecting rod. I'm pretty sure it's this one because 91 to 93, I think they did have some models without turbos, maybe, and that's why there's all the numbers in here. Okay, there's that. Then there's the ID. And there's identification marks. We're doing the bores. IDs. Literally the only thing I can find right now in these manuals is that one there, which is the limit. What I had before when I was doing the measuring is I had like a picture here, but I had like a table with all the notches, what the notches represent in the head gasket. It's actually not in here for some reason. I'll find it eventually, but the pages load up so slow that I get to a spot like it's a white page. And that's just a pain in the butt to try and scroll up. So if I hold the button down, white page, 67, 72, release your finger, loads, scroll up, that sort of thing. It's a bit of a pain. However, this might say something up here about, not necessarily cylinder block, but the type. Anyway, it probably doesn't matter so much right now. We can find it another day, and if I find it, I find it. If I don't, I don't. There was that one. There's 74 and subsequent. There's a perma gaskets manual. I'm pretty sure it's this one that has the manual in it. Like it has all the numbers in it for the head gaskets and stuff. This is the 92-page manual. The other one is a 70-something page manual. They like had a few pages apart. One page where it said the thicknesses. Yeah, I can't tell you what your thickness might or should be because the manual says these specifications, then it says those specifications. If it's out of spec, like pistons over the deck is too much, you need a different head gasket. It's as simple as that, and it will solve some problems. It won't solve all of them. But think about it this way, if your engine was out of spec anyway, pistons would already be colliding with valves, pistons would be colliding with the head. It probably wouldn't run. It'd probably be just stuck. It would seem seized, but it's not seized. Or it could seize up. But I think my engine's gotten hotter than 105, to be honest, if I think about it. Because when it said 90 degrees, the actual temperature was 101 degrees when the water was working right and doing its job. Valve springs. Come on, can we get to the juicy part about these cylinders? Oh. Oh! This says engines without turbocharger. Engines with okay. Here we go. This is what I was talking about. So when they did this protrusion measurement here, engines without turbocharger, your thickness of selected gasket when tightened. So the standard one is this one here. That's what you buy all the time, the B-type. This has a notch value of, I believe it's meant to be 2. And it literally says up here, somewhere, here you go. There's your identification mark. Every gasket you buy is a rank E based on these dots. They don't do the rank B with the dots. They just ignore it completely. So if I scroll down to here, engines with turbocharger. Feel free to take a screenshot of this, but this is what you should measure. So if your average valve value of protrusions of the pistons is this, or this, it will relate to these. If your values are higher than 7.44, maybe up to 9.74, you need the 1.6 mil gasket. I've got the rank D head gasket in my car because it's the maximum size I could buy. You can get an E, but there's also F. So essentially there's a 1.6. I've got the 1.5 because it's all I can get. Yeah, that's just for your thickness of head gasket. And if you don't believe me on that one, I've got my head gaskets here. So, these are my blown head gaskets. Leak a little bit, but it leaks mostly in the middle between those two cylinders. They're actually the lowest compression cylinders in my car right now. Then on this head gasket, this is the oldest head gasket that I've pulled out of my car, where I was having the problems, and then I lowered the problem. After I did some machining, this is what the end result was. But before I did machining, this is what the result was. So it literally just shows a little bit of improvement, if I can even see it, but there's a head gasket in the way. Then there's these ones here. When I said 1.5 mil gaskets, here's a 1.5. This is what it looks like. It looks nice. It looks neat. How does it work? How do you know it's a 1.5? Bought one before. This is $30 a head gasket, roughly, just to replace. And that will change your specs that it'll be lower compression if you put one of these in. So this is the number you need. Then you need to tell them what one you want. And tell them the size. They won't. If you go to Sprints, they've actually lost the measurement for what this head gasket is, but they told me what it was the first time I went to buy one. So I told them it's the right bloody one, because you sold me one and told me. Here's the packaging dates. Look how far apart they are. And then this one here, I think, lines up to one of these packaging dates. So 20 of the 6th, 2018. 20 of the 6th, 2018. That's the one in my car now. And this is its little brother, I'll call it. And that's the joke I'm going to make. Hello, little brother. How you doing? Packaging's ripped. I think that's why, because the packaging rips. That's why they do it in... Is that a newer one or an older one? This is an older one. I think that's why they put it in that secondary packaging, but that one, they didn't do it. So, contaminated head gasket, my friend. That's not good. But anyway, the reason I have 2 head gaskets is because of how many head gaskets I've blown. There was one before these 2 I'm pretty certain of, but that's in the bin. Then when I replaced it after and I had problems again, this is what it looked like. But you can't see because of this head gasket and that piece of paper is in the way. Okay, so this, here's your 5 notches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's how you know what the thickness of your gasket should be. but they keep making the same mistake because they're 1.4 mil. This is a 1.5 mil, but this one does the exact same thing that those two do. I don't know if I can get the head gasket down. Oh yeah, not low enough. Damn, these buggers made this tight. I can't see the numbers. But they even show on the picture 5 notches. To this manual here, it says up there what those notches actually represent. Rank E. If I was to go to the manufacturer and say that they sold me a rank E, it's meant to be a 1.5 millimeter, 1.55 millimeter gasket. These gaskets are only 1.4 millimeter gaskets. So these are out of spec. These are lies. These are jokes. But you can see all of the compression that's leaked, which is mostly there. Nothing anywhere else. I think that's just, yeah, that doesn't matter, but it's just there that there's leak compression. There at leak compression. There at leak compression in the first head gasket that I changed. Then I replaced it again. Sort of a leak. Leak. Sort of a leak. You can see how it's improved since the first time head gasket I replaced. I literally kept these as mementos to basically show, hey, this is what I've learned, and this is the problems I had, and this is how I fix them. Because the thing about the head gasket is it is a pain in the ass for those cars to have to do over and over again. To pick up the whole manifold and do what I did for $30 just to replace a head gasket. That was ridiculous. Because there was just so much weight there, and it was a delicate procedure. I even used Holomar on this head gasket that's in my car now. And that was to help keep the compression in and not let it escape, because it kept doing that and being a problem. My head was professionally reconditioned, but it's from a Hyundai. So what I'm planning on doing is getting a new head, keeping the 1.5mm head gasket, rebuilding the engine with a 1.5 gasket, and seeing how that goes one day. But there's a bunch of stuff to do. So there's the Holomar spray, which I'll show in a second once I get a picture of it. So this is the Holomar spray, and you literally spray this on your head gasket before you install it. So you spray it on both sides of your head gasket, you put it in, you put it together, and then that stuff is like, it's not a sealant so much as it is a sealant and lubricant at the same time. So it's not meant to be solid. It's not meant to go solid. It's meant to be something soft. It's not meant to be a glue, but it's sort of like a grease. It's a grease glue. It's a weird name for it, but I looked into it a little bit, and that's sort of what it is. It's not meant to hold. I can't keep trying to explain it. I'll just leave it at that. You may do your research and go see what it actually does. But those numbers there, they're not lying. Those are the numbers you need on your engine. You don't need from the engine to make sure you put the right head gasket in there. If you get the wrong head gasket, then you're in trouble. And this is also literally Mitsubishi Motors Corporation, July 1995. Manual there, revised. And then this page here with those numbers there. And if we go to the bottom of the page, Mitsubishi Motors Corporation, July 1995. There's your number for the manual, and then there it says revised because they've revised the manual. But that's all I can really say. If you really, really want to get your engine right, make sure you don't have this problem, checking your parts thoroughly, following a manual and checking it like the manual says, you won't miss the steps, but you have to literally read the manual as you're going along. Pull the engine apart, put it back together according to the manual. Then you should be good, because this is engineered. This is a manual that tells you how to rebuild your engineered motor. This is designed to go to motor reconditioners. But it's publicly available because it's so old. They have no reason to keep it to themselves. Anyway, talk to you some other time, I guess. I'm getting really tired. I want to get some sleep soon. And I want a really good drink. Because I've finished my drink, my lemonade, and I've been talking a lot. Let's see, what did he say? Oh, look at that. What does it say? Okay. Sweet. So what I essentially read while you said, just wait a second. One more. My block looks like it has broken behind the water pump when I replaced it. That... It depends. Yes, there is... When you replace the water pump, there is a hole there. But it's normally for the water pump to pump water in and out of the block. So water goes into the water pump and then it pushes it through the block. So that sounds normal to me. Doesn't sound out of place at all. I'm just reading my email that I got from the government. Essentially, I can carry up to 4,200 kilos with my Mitsubishi Triton. But that's gross combination mass. That's not my vehicle, essentially. So according to this, I could carry 2,200 kilos with a trailer. A trailer and a car on the trailer, 2,200 kilos. I think that's a good goal. If I could pull a trailer behind me that could do 2,200 kilos on the weight bridge, I've got a good shot at, doing what I need to do with the vehicle. So, what I've got to do is do some more research into this, because this will be cool information to use for future purposes with my car. Especially if I can rebuild the motor. Oh, that'll be so sweet. Anyway, I think you've had your last word of what you wanted to say. I don't think that's unusual. It sounds normal to me. I mean, if we can take a look at the one outside in the shed, and if yours looks anything like that, that's normal. But if it doesn't look like that, then something sounds out of place. But essentially, from what I can recall, there's like a slot on one side that's like this, and then there's another one on the other side that's like a little bit smaller. So there's like two holes on it, but they sort of mesh up to behind what's behind the water pump. Like there's two huge holes. It's not a crack, because if it was a crack, it'd literally be like, crack. It wouldn't be like a straight split. And if it was a straight split, that'd be interesting, because metal normally cracks like, kinky. Like a casting looks on the outside, but it cracks like that on the inside, if that makes sense. Like a glass fracture. Instead of it following the path of least resistance, it creates all the paths. Like if you get a hammer and hit glass, it just smashes and goes in all directions, and stops here, goes somewhere else, transfers the load. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I want to go and get some rest. I want to go and have a drink because I am just tired. That's why I'm laying down now like this. Because my eyes work. Thank you for watching. Now I feel like I'm super fast or something. Well, anyway, thanks for watching. I'm gonna go and get some rest, get a drink.